What if I told you that in 1982, 6 people drove into the Appalachian Mountains, and something else drove out? No bodies were ever found. No signs of struggle. Just abandoned vans, and a camera with footage too disturbing to release. But the most terrifying part? In the final recording, not everyone on screen is human. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you might question what's really watching from the woods. In the summer of 1982, the Appalachian Mountains stood as they always had, vast, green, and quietly intimidating. Thick forests stretched for miles, broken only by narrow, winding roads that seemed to lead nowhere. To some, the mountains were peaceful. To others, they felt like a place where secrets went to hide. It was along one of these lonely roads that a small caravan of vehicles made its way deeper into the wilderness. There were 3 vans in total, each carrying travelers who, until recently, had been strangers. Their meeting had not been planned in any meaningful way. They had crossed paths through a travel bulletin board in a small town on the edge of the mountains. What started as casual conversation quickly turned into a shared plan: explore the remote parts of the Appalachians, far from crowded campsites and marked trails. Daniel was the first to suggest documenting the journey. A quiet man in his early 30s, he rarely spoke unless he had something important to say. He carried a camera almost everywhere, always observing, always watching. He seemed more comfortable behind the lens than in conversation. Lisa, on the other hand, was warm and open. She worked as a nurse and had an easy way of talking to people. Her laughter often filled the silence that Daniel left behind. She believed the trip would be a chance to relax and reconnect with herself after years of stressful work. Mark and Ellen were the only couple in the group. Mark was practical and cautious, often thinking ahead about routes, supplies, and safety. Ellen balanced him out with her adventurous spirit. She was the one who encouraged them to join the caravan in the first place, insisting that they needed something exciting in their lives. Trevor, the mechanic, had joined for simpler reasons. He loved fixing things, driving long distances, and being away from cities. He had little interest in the scenery but enjoyed the freedom of the open road. If anything broke, he was the one everyone relied on. Then there was Ruby. She was the youngest of the group, no older than 20. She had been hitchhiking when Lisa first met her at a roadside diner. There was something unusual about her, not immediately obvious, but enough to make people curious. She spoke softly, often choosing her words carefully, and sometimes seemed distracted, as if listening to something others couldn't hear. Lisa had invited her along without much hesitation. The others agreed, though Mark seemed unsure at first. Still, Ruby joined them, carrying only a small backpack and a distant look in her eyes. As the caravan drove deeper into the mountains, the scenery began to change. The roads narrowed, and the trees grew taller and closer together. Sunlight struggled to reach the ground, blocked by thick layers of leaves. The air felt cooler, heavier somehow. They stopped briefly at a small gas station on the outskirts of a nearly forgotten town. The building looked old, with faded paint and a flickering sign. Inside, an elderly man stood behind the counter, watching them carefully as they entered. Mark tried to make friendly conversation, asking about the road ahead. The man didn't respond right away. Instead, he glanced out the window toward their vans. "You folks heading up the old mining road?" he finally asked. Ellen nodded, smiling. "That's the plan." The man's expression didn't change, but his voice lowered. "Best not to." Trevor laughed. "Why?" "Bad road conditions." The man shook his head slowly. "Road's fine. It's what's beyond it you should worry about." An uncomfortable silence followed. Lisa tried to lighten the mood, but the men didn't smile. Before they left, he added one more thing. "If you hear something calling from the woods, don't answer it." They brushed it off as nothing more than a local trying to scare outsiders. Still, the warning lingered in their minds as they continued their journey. By late afternoon, they reached a clearing just off the old mining road. It was a quiet spot, surrounded by dense forest on all sides. The ground was flat enough for their vans, and a small stream ran nearby. It seemed perfect. They parked in a loose circle and began setting up for the night. Trevor checked the vehicles out of habit, while Mark organized supplies. Ellen and Lisa gathered firewood, laughing as they worked. Daniel wandered around with his camera, capturing the fading light as the sun dipped behind the mountains. Ruby stayed near the edge of the clearing, staring into the trees. Daniel noticed her and raised his camera. For a moment, she didn't react. Then she slowly turned her head toward him, her expression unreadable. "Something out there?" he asked. Ruby hesitated before answering. "It feels familiar." Daniel lowered his camera slightly. "You've been here before." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked back into the forest. "I don't know," she said quietly. As evening settled in, the group gathered around a small fire. The mood was relaxed again. They shared stories, ate simple food, and tried to ignore the strange feeling that had followed them since the gas station. The forest around them grew darker and quieter. No distant sounds of animals, no rustling leaves, just stillness. After a while, Ruby stood up suddenly. "I'm going for a walk," she said. Lisa looked up. "Now? It's getting dark." "I won't go far." Before anyone could stop her, she disappeared into the trees. At first, no one was too concerned. But as time passed, the atmosphere began to shift. The fire crackled softly, but the silence beyond it felt heavy. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. Mark stood up. "She's been gone too long." Just as he was about to suggest searching for her, a figure emerged from the darkness. Ruby stepped back into the clearing. Her face was pale. Her movements were slow, almost unsteady. Lisa rushed toward her. "Where were you?" "We were getting worried." Ruby looked at her, then at the others. "I found something," she said. "What?" Daniel asked. "A campsite," she replied. "Not far from here." Trevor frowned. "So? Maybe other travelers?" Ruby shook her head. "No, it didn't feel like that." The group exchanged uneasy glances. "What do you mean?" Ellen asked. Ruby swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It felt like someone had just left, but I didn't see anyone." The fire crackled louder, as if filling the silence that followed. No one laughed this time. That night, as they retreated to their vans, the forest seemed closer than before. And somewhere, deep among the trees, something unseen waited. Morning came slowly in the mountains. A pale gray light filtered through the thick trees, replacing the darkness of night without ever fully becoming bright. The clearing looked different now, colder, quieter, as if something had changed while they slept. Daniel was the first to step out of his van. He stretched, holding his camera loosely in one hand, and scanned the campsite out of habit. The fire from the night before had burned down to ash. The air felt damp, and a thin layer of fog clung low to the ground. Something felt off. He couldn't explain it at first, but there was a subtle absence, a missing piece in the scene that his mind hadn't yet identified. He raised his camera, instinctively taking a few shots of the morning light cutting through the trees. Then he noticed it. Trevor's van door was open. Daniel frowned. Trevor had been the type to check everything twice before settling in for the night. Leaving a door open didn't match his careful nature. "Trevor." Daniel called out. No answer. He walked closer, his boots crunching softly against the dirt and scattered leaves. Inside the van, everything looked normal. Tools were neatly arranged. A half-empty bottle of water sat on the dashboard. Trevor's jacket was draped over the seat. But Trevor himself was gone. By then, Lisa and Mark had stepped out of their vans as well. Ellen followed shortly after, wrapping a light jacket around herself. "What's going on?" Lisa asked, noticing the tension in Daniel's posture. "Trevor's not here," Daniel said. Mark walked over quickly, glancing inside the van. "Maybe he went for a walk." "Without his boots," Daniel pointed out. They all looked down. Trevor's boots were still inside the van. A quiet unease spread through the group. "Trevor!" Mark called out loudly, his voice echoing into the forest. No reply came back, only the hollow sound of his own voice fading into the trees. Lisa tried to stay calm. He could be nearby. Maybe he stepped out early. "Barefoot," Ellen said, her voice uncertain. They began searching the immediate area. At first, they stayed close to the clearing, calling Trevor's name, checking behind trees and near the stream. But as minutes turned into an hour, their movements grew more frantic. Daniel kept his camera with him, documenting everything. Not out of curiosity, but because something in him felt that this mattered. That it might be important later. It was Daniel who found the footprints. "Over here," he called. The others gathered around him. In a patch of soft dirt near the edge of the clearing, there were clear impressions of bare feet. They matched Trevor's size. The prints led away from the campsite. But that wasn't the strange part. There were other footprints too. Deeper. Longer. Not quite human. Mark crouched down, studying them. "These don't make sense." Lisa shook her head. "Maybe it's just the way the ground is shaped." "No," Daniel said quietly. "Look at the spacing." The footprints were uneven, as if whatever made them didn't walk normally. Some steps were too far apart. Others were twisted at odd angles. Ellen stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "You think someone took him?" Mark stood up, his expression tense. "Or something." Silence fell over the group again. Ruby, who had been standing slightly apart, finally spoke. "He didn't go willingly." Everyone turned to her. "How do you know that?" Lisa asked. Ruby hesitated, then looked toward the trees. "Because I heard something last night." Mark frowned. "You didn't say anything." "I wasn't sure," Ruby replied. "It sounded like voices. But not right. Like someone trying to copy how people talk." A chill ran through the group. "That's ridiculous," Mark said, though his voice lacked confidence. "Is it?" Ruby asked softly. No one answered. They followed the footprints for a short distance, but the trail quickly became harder to see. The forest floor grew uneven, covered in leaves and roots that hid any clear path. Within minutes, they lost it completely. Mark let out a frustrated breath. "We're wasting time. We need to think clearly." "What are you suggesting?" Lisa asked. "We leave," he said. "Drive back to the nearest town and get help." Ellen looked conflicted. "And just leave Trevor here?" "We can't help him if we get lost too," Mark replied. "This place isn't safe." Daniel stayed quiet, but he agreed. Something about the forest felt wrong, not just dangerous, but unnatural. They returned to the campsite, moving quickly now. The earlier excitement of their trip was gone, replaced by a growing sense of dread. "Pack everything," Mark said. "We leave in 10 minutes." Trevor's disappearance hung heavily over them as they gathered their things. No one spoke much. Even Lisa, who had tried to stay positive, seemed shaken. Ruby stood still for a moment, staring into the woods again. "They're watching," she whispered. Daniel heard her but said nothing. Soon, they climbed into their vans, one by one. Mark turned the key in the ignition. Nothing happened. He tried again. The engine made a weak clicking sound, then fell silent. "Try again," Ellen said. "I am," Mark snapped, turning the key repeatedly. Still nothing. From the other van, Lisa leaned out her window. "Ours isn't starting either." Daniel checked his. Same result. 3 vans. All dead. Trevor, the one person who might have been able to fix it, was gone. A heavy silence settled over the clearing. "This doesn't make sense," Mark said. "They were fine yesterday." Daniel stepped out again, looking around. The forest seemed closer somehow, the trees pressing in on the edges of the clearing. The fog hadn't lifted. If anything, it had grown thicker. "We need another plan," Lisa said quietly. Before anyone could respond, a faint sound drifted through the trees. A voice. "Help!" The group froze. It sounded like Trevor. Mark took a step forward instinctively. "Trevor." "Don't," Ruby said sharply. They all turned to her. Her face had gone pale again. "That's not him," she said. The voice came again, slightly clearer this time. "Help me." It was coming from deeper in the forest. Mark looked torn. Every instinct told him to go after his missing friend. But something in Ruby's expression stopped him. The voice echoed once more. Then it changed. The tone shifted, subtly, but enough. It no longer sounded like a person in need. It sounded like something pretending to be one. And suddenly, the silence that followed felt far more dangerous than the sound itself. The voice faded, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. No one moved at first. Mark stood frozen, staring into the trees where the sound had come from. His fists were clenched, his breathing uneven. Every instinct told him to go after Trevor, to follow that voice and bring him back. But something deeper, something harder to ignore, held him in place. "That wasn't right," Lisa said quietly. No one disagreed. Ruby stepped back from the edge of the clearing, shaking her head. "It's trying to pull us in." Mark turned to her, frustration breaking through his fear. "You don't know that. What if he's actually out there?" Ruby met his gaze. "Would you bet your life on it?" The question hung in the air. Daniel, who had been silently recording everything, lowered his camera slightly. "We can't stay here," he said. "And we can't follow that voice." Mark ran a hand through his hair, clearly torn. Ellen placed a hand on his arm, grounding him. "We need another way," she said softly. Lisa nodded. "Ruby mentioned a campsite yesterday. Maybe whoever was there left something behind, supplies, a map, anything." Mark hesitated, then gave a reluctant nod. "Fine. But we stay together. No one wanders off." Ruby didn't respond. She simply turned toward the forest, as if she already knew the way. They packed only what they could carry: water, a few tools, flashlights, and Daniel's camera. The vans, once symbols of safety and escape, were now useless shells left behind in the clearing. Before leaving, Daniel took one last photo of the campsite. Something about it felt important, like a moment frozen just before everything changed. Then they stepped into the trees. The forest swallowed them quickly. Within minutes, the clearing was gone from sight, replaced by dense layers of towering trunks and tangled undergrowth. The light dimmed as the canopy thickened overhead, casting long shadows that shifted with every step. Ruby walked ahead, moving with a strange sense of certainty. She didn't hesitate or second-guess her direction, even when the terrain became uneven. "You sure you know where you're going?" Mark asked. "Yes," she replied without turning around. "How?" Ellen added. Ruby paused briefly, then continued walking. "I just do." The answer didn't satisfy anyone, but they followed her anyway. Time passed strangely in the forest. It felt longer than it should have. The air was still, almost suffocating, and the usual sounds of nature were missing. No birds. No insects. Just the quiet crunch of their footsteps. Daniel noticed it first. "There's no sound," he said. Lisa looked around. "What do you mean?" "Nothing," he replied. "No animals. No wind. It's like everything's gone." They slowed down, listening. He was right. The silence wasn't natural. It wasn't peaceful, it was empty. Ellen wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't like this." Ruby stopped walking. "We're close," she said. Ahead, through the trees, something came into view. A clearing. Smaller than the one they had left, but unmistakable. And in the center of it, the campsite. It looked exactly as Ruby had described. Old tents, torn and collapsing. Rusted cooking equipment scattered across the ground. Pieces of fabric tangled in branches. Everything was worn, faded, and covered in dirt, as if it had been abandoned for years. But there was something else. Bones. Lisa gasped, covering her mouth. They were scattered throughout the clearing, some partially buried, others fully exposed. Long bones, small bones, fragments that were impossible to ignore. Human. Mark stepped forward slowly, his face pale. This isn't possible." Ellen shook her head. "Maybe it's an animal den." "No," Daniel said, his voice steady but low. "These are human remains." Lisa turned away, unable to look any longer. "We need to leave." "Wait," Daniel said. Near one of the collapsed tents, something caught his attention. A small, weathered object half hidden beneath debris. He approached carefully and brushed away the dirt. A journal. The cover was cracked and worn, but still intact. He picked it up gently, as if it might fall apart in his hands. "What is it?" Mark asked. Daniel opened it. Inside were handwritten entries, faded but readable. Dates marked the pages, 1957. "This is old," Daniel said. "Really old." They gathered around him as he flipped through the pages. The early entries described a group of travelers, much like them. They spoke of the beauty of the mountains, the excitement of exploring untouched land. But as the entries continued, the tone changed. The writing became rushed. Uneven. Afraid. Daniel read one entry aloud. "We hear them at night. They sound like us, but not exactly. Like something trying to learn how to speak." Lisa closed her eyes, shaking her head. Another entry. "They watch from the trees. We see them moving, but when we look directly, they're gone." Mark swallowed hard. This isn't real. Daniel turned to the final pages. The handwriting was barely legible now, as if written in panic. "They don't let you leave once they choose you." Silence fell over the group. Ellen stepped back, tears forming in her eyes. "We need to go. Now." Before anyone could respond, a loud crack echoed through the forest. They all jumped. "Did you hear that?" Lisa whispered. Another sound followed. Not far. Too close. "Ellen," Mark said, turning toward her. No answer. He looked around. Ellen was gone. Panic exploded instantly. "Ellen!" Mark shouted, spinning in every direction. "Ellen, where are you?" There was no response. No movement. Nothing. Lisa began to cry. She was right here, she was just right here. Daniel scanned the clearing, his camera shaking slightly in his hands. There's no way she could have gone far. Ruby stood perfectly still. "They're getting faster," she said quietly. Mark grabbed her arm. What does that mean? Ruby looked at him, her expression filled with something close to fear, but not surprise. They're learning us, she said. Mark let go, backing away. The forest, once silent, now felt crowded. Not with sound, but with presence. Something was out there. Watching. Waiting. And now, it had taken another one of them. Ellen's disappearance broke something in the group. One moment she had been standing just a few feet away, and the next, gone. No scream. No struggle. Just absence. It was as if the forest had reached in and erased her. Mark refused to accept it. Ellen, he shouted again, his voice cracking as it echoed through the trees. This isn't funny. Come out. But the forest gave nothing back. Lisa was shaking uncontrollably now, tears streaming down her face. We can't stay here, we can't stay here. Daniel kept turning in slow circles, scanning every shadow through the lens of his camera. His hands trembled, but he forced himself to keep recording. Somehow, it felt like the only thing grounding him to reality. Ruby stood apart again, her eyes fixed on the trees beyond the campsite. They're closer now, she whispered. Mark turned on her, anger finally overpowering his fear. Stop saying things like that. What do you know? He stepped toward her. You brought us here. You knew about this place. Ruby didn't flinch. I didn't bring you here. You chose to come. You led us to this campsite. Mark snapped. Because you were already in their path, Ruby replied calmly. This was going to happen anyway. That doesn't make any sense. Lisa cried. Ruby finally looked at them all, her expression heavy with something deeper than fear, something like resignation. You think this is random, she said. You think we just got unlucky? No one answered. Ruby took a slow breath. This place, it doesn't work like the rest of the world. Once you enter deep enough, something notices you. Daniel lowered his camera slightly. Something. Ruby nodded. It watches first. Learns how you move. How you sound. How you think. Mark shook his head. No. No, that's not possible. I've seen it before, Ruby said. The words landed heavily. Lisa wiped her tears. What do you mean? Ruby hesitated, as if deciding how much to reveal. Then she spoke. I was here once. When I was a child. The group went still. My family came on a trip, she continued. We camped not far from here. At first, everything was normal. Then, people started disappearing. Her voice remained steady, but her eyes drifted, as if replaying something she wished she could forget. My father went missing first. Then my brother. My mother and I tried to leave, but the roads didn't make sense anymore. We kept ending up in the same place. Daniel felt a chill run through him. Like us. Ruby nodded. What happened to your mother? Lisa asked softly. Ruby looked down. She heard my father calling her from the woods. Mark stiffened. She knew something was wrong, Ruby said. But she still went after him. And? Lisa whispered. Ruby didn't answer right away. She never came back. Silence settled over them again, heavier than before. Mark stepped back, his anger fading into something more uncertain. Then how did you survive? Ruby met his eyes. I didn't run. The answer confused them. What does that mean? Daniel asked. It means, Ruby said slowly, I stopped fighting it. Before anyone could respond, a movement caught Daniel's attention. Wait, he said, raising his camera. At the edge of the clearing, something shifted between the trees. A figure. Tall. thin. Unnaturally still. "Do you see that?" Daniel whispered. The others turned. At first, it was hard to make out. The shape blended too well with the shadows. Then it moved. Just slightly. Lisa gasped. That's a person." But it wasn't. Not quite. The figure stepped forward into the faint light. Its form resembled a human, but everything about it was wrong. Its arms hung too long, its posture slightly bent in ways that didn't look natural. Its face looked like Trevor. Mark stumbled back. No, that's not him." The thing tilted its head, mimicking a familiar gesture, but too slowly, too deliberately. Then it spoke. "Mark." The voice was Trevor's. Perfectly matched. But empty. Lisa screamed. More movement followed. From behind the trees, other figures began to emerge. One looked like Ellen. Another, Lisa herself. Their faces were almost right, but not enough. Their expressions didn't match their eyes. Their movements were delayed, as if controlled by something still learning how to operate them. "They're copying us," Daniel said, barely able to keep his voice steady. Ruby nodded. "They use what they take." Mark backed away, shaking his head violently. "This isn't real. This isn't happening." One of the figures stepped closer. "Help," it said, in Ellen's voice. Mark froze. Ruby grabbed his arm. "Don't listen to it." But it was too late. Mark pulled away from her. "Ellen," he called out, his voice breaking. The figure smiled. The expression stretched too wide. "Mark." He took a step forward. Then another. "Mark, stop." Lisa cried. But he didn't. It was like he couldn't. The figure reached out its hand. And Mark ran toward it. "No." Daniel shouted. But Mark disappeared into the trees. The figure followed. And just like that, he was gone. Only 3 remained now. Daniel. Lisa. Ruby. The clearing felt smaller. The shadows darker. The air heavier. Lisa collapsed to her knees, sobbing. "We're going to die here, we're all going to die." Daniel didn't know what to say. He kept filming. Because if he stopped, it would all feel too real. Ruby looked toward the forest again, her expression distant. "They're almost ready," she said. Daniel turned to her. "Ready for what?" Ruby didn't answer immediately. Instead, she whispered something that made his blood run cold. "To replace us." The figures in the trees didn't move closer. They didn't need to. They were patient. Learning. Waiting for the right moment. And deep in the shadows, more shapes shifted, watching, listening, becoming. The forest was no longer just a place. It was something alive. And it was closing in. The night felt endless. Darkness swallowed the forest completely, leaving only fragments of visibility whenever Daniel's camera light flickered across the trees. The battery was running low, but he refused to turn it off. It was the only thing keeping him focused, something real in a place that no longer followed any rules. Lisa sat on the ground, her back against a fallen log, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her breathing came in uneven bursts, each one sharper than the last. She had cried so much that no tears were left, only dry, silent fear. Ruby stood a few feet away, motionless. She hadn't sat down. Hadn't rested. Hadn't even looked tired. She was staring into the forest again. Always the forest. Daniel adjusted the camera slightly, capturing both of them in frame. His voice, when he spoke, was quieter than before, strained, like it took effort to form words. If anyone finds this, he said, pausing as if unsure how to continue. We didn't get lost. Something is here. It's been here a long time. Lisa let out a weak laugh that didn't sound like her at all. No one's going to find us. Daniel didn't respond. Because part of him knew she was right. The forest had already proven that leaving wasn't an option. Paths changed. Distances stretched. Time didn't feel normal. And those things in the trees. They were getting closer. A soft sound broke the silence. Footsteps. Lisa's head snapped up. Did you hear that? Daniel slowly turned the camera toward the direction of the sound. Nothing. Just trees. But the footsteps came again. Slow. Careful. Circling. Ruby finally spoke. They're not hiding anymore. The words made the air feel colder. Why? Daniel asked. Ruby didn't look at him. Because they don't need to. Lisa shook her head. Stop saying things like that. Another sound followed. A voice. Lisa. Her name. Soft. Familiar. Lisa froze. It sounded exactly like her mother. No, she whispered. Lisa, come here. The voice drifted between the trees, gentle and inviting. Daniel stepped in front of her. Don't listen. Lisa covered her ears. It's not real, it's not real. But the voice continued. Lisa, please. Her breathing grew faster. I just want to go home, she said, almost pleading. The voice responded instantly. You can, just come here. Ruby closed her eyes briefly, as if she had seen this moment before. They find what you trust most, she said. Lisa slowly stood up. Daniel grabbed her arm. Don't. Tears filled her eyes again. What if it's real? It's not, he said firmly. But doubt had already taken hold. The voice came again. Closer this time. Lisa. She pulled her arm free. I'm sorry, she whispered. And before Daniel could stop her, she ran into the forest. Lisa, he shouted, chasing after her for a few steps. But Ruby grabbed him. Don't, she said sharply. He struggled against her. We can't just let her go. She's already gone, Ruby replied. The words hit harder than anything else. Daniel stopped. The forest swallowed Lisa's footsteps quickly. Then. Silence. No scream. No sound. Nothing. Daniel stood frozen, staring into the darkness where she had disappeared. Then, slowly, he turned the camera back toward himself. His face was pale, eyes wide, breathing uneven. 3 left, he said quietly. Then he looked at Ruby. Or maybe just 2. Time passed. Or maybe it didn't. It was impossible to tell anymore. The forest felt like it was shifting around them, changing shape without moving. Every direction looked the same. Every step felt like it led nowhere. Daniel kept recording. Even when his hands shook. Even when the battery warning blinked. Because stopping felt like giving up. Why did you come back? He finally asked. Ruby didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was softer than before. I tried to leave this place behind, she said. For years, I told myself it wasn't real. That I imagined it. Daniel listened, barely blinking. But it never left me, she continued. I would hear things sometimes. See shapes where there shouldn't be any. And then, the dreams started. What kind of dreams? He asked. Ruby looked at him for the first time in a while. Being here, she said. Standing in this forest again. But not afraid. Daniel frowned. Not afraid. She shook her head slowly. Accepted. The word lingered. They don't just take people, Ruby said. They learn them. Replace them. And whatever they are, they need more. Daniel felt a growing sense of dread. So why bring us? Ruby's expression didn't change. I didn't bring you, she said. But I knew this would happen. That doesn't answer my question. Ruby stepped closer to the trees. They called me back, she said. Daniel's grip tightened on the camera. And you came willingly? Yes. Why? Ruby looked into the darkness ahead. Because I think I was never meant to leave. The realization hit Daniel all at once. You're not trying to escape, he said. Ruby didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence was the answer. A shape moved behind her. Daniel's breath caught. Ruby, don't move. But she didn't react. The shape stepped closer. Then another. And another. Figures emerging from the trees. Some familiar. Some not. One looked like Lisa. Another like Mark. Their movements were smoother now. More natural. More convincing. They're ready, Ruby said softly. For what? Daniel asked, his voice barely audible. She turned to him one last time. To take our place. The figures stopped just at the edge of the light. Watching. Waiting. Ruby stepped toward them. Daniel's voice broke. Ruby, don't. But she kept walking. No hesitation. No fear. As if she belonged there. One of the figures reached out. She took its hand. And disappeared into the darkness. Daniel was alone. The camera shook violently now as he backed away. No, no, no. The figures began to move closer. Slowly. Carefully. Surrounding him. One stepped forward. It looked exactly like him. Same face. Same posture. Same eyes. But empty. Daniel raised the camera toward it. As if trying to prove something. As if trying to understand. The thing tilted its head. Mirroring him. Then it smiled. A perfect copy. But wrong. Daniel stumbled backward. The ground gave way beneath him. The camera slipped from his hands. Falling. Spinning. Landing on its side. The last image it captured. Daniel, surrounded by copies of himself. Reaching. Closing in. The screen flickered. Then. Black. Epilogue. Weeks later, search teams entered the Appalachian region after reports of abandoned vehicles were found near an old mining road. 6 vans. All empty. No signs of struggle. No bodies. Nothing. Official reports called it a missing persons case. Unsolved. Unexplained. But one item was recovered. A camera. Damaged. But not destroyed. The footage was never officially released to the public. Those who have claimed to see it speak very little about what it shows. Only this. That the people in the final frames don't all move the way they should. And sometimes, deep in the Appalachian Mountains, travelers report seeing figures standing silently between the trees. Perfectly still. Watching anyone who passes. As if learning. As if waiting. For the next caravan to arrive.